I saw the king of the Andes today. His wings stretched near 11 feet. I met the king of the Andes face to face today. He looked me in the eye and asked if I wanted to play. I played with the king of the Andes today. We walked and jumped along the way. I fell in love with the king of the Andes today.
Probably my most rewarding thing that's happened to me in my entire career did happen at Tracy Aviary, and that involves Andy and Condor. That is on exhibit here. His name is Andy.
Andy was one of the first birds in my career that I really bonded with and had a relationship with.
I find Andy to be extremely inspiring and charismatic. Seeing the reaction that he gets from almost every single person that has seen him is just amazing. I don't think anybody has ever laid eyes upon Andy and not fallen right in love with him. Even people that are not inside of the aviary, I mean, we'll be cleaning inside of his enclosure, and people will be shouting questions to us from outside of the fence.
Andy, the Andean condor at Tracy Aviary, is the longest living, well, I guess there's trees that are older than Andy here at Tracy Aviary, but Andy has been at Tracy Aviary for decades.
I like to think about the series of fads and trends that Andy would have seen walking past him. I mean, he would have seen poodle skirts and wondered what that deal was. He would have seen 70s, the 80s. He would have seen a decade of neon fly past the front of his exhibit. I wish that there was a way to get inside Andy's brain and find out what it would have been like to just watch this parade of people come through the park.
I remember when I was little, I came here with my aunt, and we were walking around and we saw the vulture, and he just started moving his wings, and it scared me a little bit, but I got used to him.
I have been coming to the aviary for as long as I can remember, since like 4 years old, when they used to have chimpanzees and monkeys here. My earliest memory of Andy would probably be about when I was 5 years old, kindergarten age, coming up here. We used to come up on Sundays when they were closed, and we would walk around the perimeter of the Tracy Aviary with the family, and we would always peek through, and you could see the vultures from the outside of the park.
We love Andy because he is just an amazing vulture. He is the biggest of all the vultures, and he doesn't make a lot of noise, which makes my little sensitive 3-year-old very happy. But overall, he just seems like he's very sensitive, and he just seems like a gentle soul.
My first memory of Andy was when he was in the monkey cages over there with his sister, and they had a big log that they used to run along. And I remember this because I had small children, and my daughter looked at them and saw them running along the log and said, "Careful, guys." Afraid that they would fall off the log, but of course they didn't.
I actually have a neighbor, Don, in the early 60s. He lived nearby Liberty Park. He would catch fish, mostly carp, out of the Liberty Lake, just east of us here. And he had a great interest in nature, and he got to know the curator at the time. And the curator would let him go in with Andy and feed him fish that he caught out of the lake.
So Andy's kind of impacted me personally, because I didn't grow up coming to the Tracy Aviary. I hadn't been here in a long time. I visited once when I first moved here, but living in the neighborhood, I used to run Liberty Park all the time. And obviously you get to see Andy up close and personal, even from just outside our gates. So when I first started, it was incredible to actually meet him kind of face to face. And then right after I started, about a month or so after, I took a trip to Argentina. And down in Argentina, I was down in the glaciers, and actually saw the Andean condors in the wild and soaring overhead with their 11-foot wingspan. It was really impactful to be able to come back and be like, I just saw one of you in the wild. So it was really fun. So he's got a special place for me.
Andy hatched at the San Diego Zoo, so he was part of the SSP program for Andean condors, the breeding program.
My dad was a curator here, and so he traded a lot of Utah birds for other birds so they could have that bird in an exhibit. And Andy was traded for something, I don't know what. And when he came here, he was just a little fellow.
He did live with his sister for most of his life, but she died in the late 90s.
People often say, oh, he's all by himself. Andy wants to be all by himself. He doesn't want another condor in there.
So once we tried to get him, it wasn't really a mate, it was just a companion. And he loved her and just wanted to get next to her all the time and would chase her around to get close. She would run away, he would chase, then she would end up biting him.
And Andy's been a bachelor since then.
We are always trying to give the birds different things to play with, and we gave him a shoe at one point just to chew on and rip up. He got the shoe stuck on his head, so we had to get in there with him and get the shoe off again. So we never gave him shoes again, but that was pretty funny to see.
We celebrate his hatch day, or bird day as we call it, every year. Happy birthday to you! In January, here at the aviary, we have a party for him. We do different things for him every year. Before he came out of his enclosure, they would do things right in his enclosure. He'd have piñatas or birthday presents to rip into, and guests could watch him. Lots of educational things going on at the aviary about vultures. But the last few of his birthday parties, he's actually been attending his own party. He comes out, he goes on walks, he rips open some gifts. I've been working with him for about 3.5 years now, and we really trust each other. You know, I trust him and he definitely trusts me.
One of my favorite things about Andy, probably when it comes to working with him, is how he sometimes will want to do things that he sees us doing, and he'll want to kind of help us.
Sometimes Andy is nervous and afraid of new things when we have him out. He doesn't just barrel into everything. But one of the things that I found is that if I do something first, Andy will, well, if you can do it, I can do it. Kind of like a monkey see, monkey do.
In fact, during our AZA inspection a few months ago, our boss Helen sent us an email telling us that when we had to do all the weeding and stuff that required bringing these big tools into his enclosure, we had to do it after hours so that we could remove him from the enclosure, because otherwise he would try to help us.
Sometimes it actually works to my detriment, because I have to do things that maybe I don't really want to do. Like the first time we ever had him up on top of his cave there, to get him up there required me getting up there. Similarly, when we brought him over to his new enclosure and he was learning the space in his new enclosure, he's got all these nice steps and ledges that he can get up on, but he'd never been up on them. So you can guess who had to get up on all the super high ledges first, and it wasn't Andy. But as soon as I'd done it, you know, he did it. He used to be a part of our aviculture exhibit collection, so I would watch the keepers working around him.
When I started, everyone thought he was a very aggressive bird. Turns out he was just really friendly and misunderstood. So once I started working with him, I changed a lot of the rules that we had for him that said who can go in and things like that, because I did realize that he wasn't an aggressive bird. He just wanted a lot of interaction.
He's a pretty laid-back condor. Like he's very gentle and easygoing, which is not always the case with male Andean condors. So after observing him for a short while and being a behaviorist, an animal trainer as I am, I could just see potential in Andy to do more. But he's always been in his enclosure. And one of the things that I wanted to do when I first came here was to work with Andy with the goal of bringing him outside of his enclosure and being able to take him out around the aviary. So I approached our executive director, who is my boss, and just said, you know, I'd really like a chance to work with Andy and do some training with him and see what we can get him to do. And he was, well, you know, what do you want to do? You know, what can you do with him in his enclosure? And I was like, no, I want to bring him out. And he, I think, at first thought I was nuts, like I wanted to bring this big 50-year-old bird that had never been out of its enclosure out into the aviary, but thankfully he trusts me enough to give me a chance. And working with him in his enclosure, evaluating him, seeing that, you know, I really felt like he had the potential to do this, what I wanted to do with him, and then having the trust of my management here at the aviary to do this and make it work. And it did, so I'm glad.
And Andy went for his first walk. It was, I probably had some mixed emotions. It was kind of sad to see him leave our department and go to a different department, but at the same time, it was thrilling to be able to see him get out of the cage that he'd been in for the last 50 years and be able to go out and experience the world.
We used to do early in the mornings before there was any visitors at the aviary, just to make sure things were going to be okay and keep everything nice and safe and neutral for Andy, because of course, having lived in his enclosure for 50 years at that point, coming out and seeing the rest of the aviary was a lot of stimulation for him. And the first time we ever brought him out, it was exciting and also a little bit nerve-wracking. I mean, you don't exactly know what's going to happen. You've done all the groundwork, and I'd spent a lot of time with Andy before I ever brought him out, building a relationship with him, making sure he trusted me and felt comfortable with me.
When Helen trained Andy enough to allow him to come out and walk around the aviary was a pretty remarkable time, I thought, because Andy can fly.
And then we brought him out, and the first thing that he did as soon as we opened the gate to his enclosure and he walked out is run up the hill. There was a little bit of a hill in front of his enclosure, and he ran up the hill, spread his wings, started beating his wings on the hill. I thought I was going to pass out. I thought he was just going to take off and, you know, oh no, I'll be in trouble if the first time out I lose the condor. But I think he was just excited to be out there, and we spent about 2 hours walking around the aviary. I have to say, I was getting a little teary-eyed. It was really emotional. You're seeing those things new through their eyes, and it's just sort of enchanting. Makes you notice things that you started to take for granted, because we all take nature for granted, and then you see somebody exploring it for the first time, and it makes you realize, how interesting and wonderful the things around us really are. So here at Tracy Aviary, we've got amazing grounds, beautiful horticulture, and a fantastic horticulture staff. And they are very firm with us employees that we are not allowed to walk in the flower beds. What is that? Compaction is forever, or they say they don't want us, trampling in the flower beds and what have you. So we're all super respectful of that. except Andy. So he will trample through the flower beds. Not only that, he'll actually uproot things that they've planted. He's ripped up landscape fabric, taken burlap wrap off trees. And the first couple of times he ever trashed any of our beautiful horticulture, I was terrified. I'm like, Andy, I'm gonna get in trouble, like our horticulture stuff. I'm gonna be so upset. They're gonna know where this came from. So I went, you know, kind of hand on heart to our horticulture director and said, you know, Andy did this, I'm really sorry. At the time he'd ripped up a whole swath of landscape fabric. He was having a ball. In the wild, they rip and tear at carcass hides. That's what they're made to do. So I think he was just getting a ton of like intrinsic reinforcement from the ripping and tearing, but he made a mess.
I have 3 kids and they mess up their rooms and they mess up their house. And I certainly, you know, it's part of being a kid. And for Andy, it's part of being a bird. When Andy picks flowers in his exhibit, I think it's all good.
I find it amusing that he's just so loved here that he'll break things or, you know, rip things up and really nobody cares. We'd be in trouble, but Andy's fine. So I love that about him. I love how much the staff love him. So Andy's been going on walks around Tracy Aviary now for about 3 years.
Going out for a walk with him is always pretty interesting. You never know what to expect. It's really exciting. I recommend it for anyone. Nothing out of the ordinarily bad has happened, but sometimes we've had some exciting situations, and that makes going out for the daily walk with him more exciting for me because I do it every single day, and every single time it's totally different. So depending on his mood, whether he wants to play around, maybe bother some of the other birds like the eagles, which is pretty funny to watch. Whether he wants to do that or whether he wants to just beeline straight along with Helen, whichever one he chooses to do is fine because it always allows for these great photo opportunities and it's really enriching for him and for the people around him. This is like one of the only places in the world that you can go for a walk with an Andean condor.
People have no idea that a bird like Andy can walk up to a child in a stroller and be perfectly calm and safe and engage with that child without there being any danger.
I was here with my little 4-year-old grandson a couple of weeks ago, and Helen came out with Andy, and Andy walked up to little Sammy, and he's about the same height. And Sammy looked at him and said, "Does he bite?" And Helen said, "No. He chooses not to bite. He does have a mouth, so he could bite. I have a mouth, I could bite. You have a mouth, do you bite?" And Sammy said, "No." He said, in the 54 years that we've had Andy, he's never bit anyone.
I think it's amazing to go for a walk with Andy because, first of all, he's huge and there's very few situations where you can be that close to such a big bird. In the wild, you would never get that close. And most of the times, if you see them in a zoo or in an aviary, they're usually inside of an exhibit. So getting to see them that close and personal with nothing between you, it takes your breath away.
It's so much fun to walk with a condor because you don't get to walk with a condor pretty much anywhere else. This is the only place that I know of that you can actually walk right behind a condor, see him fly a little bit, do some jumps, and he's just amazing to watch his wingspan when he does that too, and you get so close to him.
I think Andy's influenced the aviary in a lot of ways, and with Helen DeShaw getting Andy out of his exhibit and meeting guests, he's really an ambassador not just for condors in the wild, but for all the birds of the aviary.
I think that Helen has definitely been the one person that has helped him come out of his shell, for sure. I think without Helen, I think it might have been a little bit harder for him.
I would say that a 50-year-old bird that got let out of a small cage into a big cage and was able to adapt to that Just goes to show that anybody, as long as they're taking baby steps and has help from other people, can overcome any obstacle.
I think that Andy could definitely teach a lot of people how to overcome any type of
Hurdles.
Like hurdles, yeah. Like any kind of hurdles or anything like that. I think Andy can teach a lot of people things just based on his own story and how he was in his own little home for a while, and then he was allowed to be out on walks, and he's really seems like really adjusted to a lot of people.
Sometimes getting out of your comfort zone is great. Like Andy got out of his comfort zone to just walk around and adventure, and some people don't like to get out of their comfort zone because it's the comfort zone. They like to stay in their comfort zone, never go out.
Well, you look at a bird as big as Andy, it's got those features that Andy has, and it's hard not to be curious. And when you see Andy on a regular basis, it's pretty hard not to care for Andy and for the habitats that Andy and his brethren depend upon, and what other birds need in habitats around the world.
Today I saw the king of the Andes. He invited me to fly with him. But I cannot fly, replied I, who is earthbound. Then come dance with me, said he. But I do not know how to dance, replied I, who has 2 left feet. Then I shall walk with you, said he. So today I walked with a condor.